I spent the last 10 years learning some very difficult lessons. And, I had wished I didn't have to go through the amount of pain and time that it took to learn them. But looking back, I don't know if I could have gained that type of understanding without having gone through what I went through. My hope is that if you're watching this, you get something out of it and you're able to apply it into your life so you end up better than I did. Like everyone else, I graduated high school, went to college, but went to college without really knowing what I wanted to do. And I think that's the case for most people. Is that, you're at this age where you barely even know yourself. And you get pushed into college and take on a considerable amount of debt, not really knowing what that's going to mean for the next 5, 10, 15 years of your life. So imagine going to college, trying to figure out what major to go into, and eventually getting your bachelor's degree, and then being forced to figure out how to pay off that debt and make a living. And you'll find that for most people who are already in their careers, if you ask them what they majored in, more chances than not, they're not even doing work that's related to their major, which just shows you how kind of useless a college degree is. But back in my day, in my parents' day, a college degree was a prerequisite to even be considered at any place of employment. It was the ticket to the workforce, and you didn't really have any other options. And so I ended up getting a job, thankfully, that had nothing to do with my major. And I began the corporate ladder climbing. And I would say that it's a cliche at this point of living this life where you don't really like your job and you feel like a soulless worker just being programmed to add shareholder value, and you clock in, you clock out, and you just kind of repeat that. And for me, it was difficult to maintain. For a number of different reasons, I felt stuck. I had these financial obligations that I had to pay off. I had to figure out how to make a living and to survive. Growing up in an immigrant background where my parents took this leap of faith to come to this country where they can't even speak the language, they have no idea how things worked, and struggled to survive. And I was witnessing firsthand all of their sacrifices to give me and my sister this opportunity for higher education and being able to live out this American dream. And I didn't know how to be grateful other than to live that life. I wanted to show my parents, hey, all of your blood, sweat, and tears, they weren't wasted. They paid off finally. Thank God. And so, being a grateful son, I thought this is what I was supposed to do. I also understood the privilege that I had, that the position I was in was a position that a lot of people would have fought for, and that I was, lucky to be in this country where I was afforded these different opportunities. But I found myself extremely miserable. And during that time, I didn't know why. I remember this moment in my life where I I was extremely depressed, and I was confused because I would look at my life And I would see all of these things I could be grateful for. Having loving and supporting parents, a great sister, supportive friends, a stable job, a house even, an able body, and yet I was still so unhappy. And I remember looking up statistics about kind of my demographic because I was curious. I wanted to know, what percentile do I fall under for my age group and the money that I was making? And within the United States, I was in the top 3%, meaning I was making more than 97% of people who were my age in one of the world's most wealthiest nations. So, given that, I felt like I didn't have a say, that I just needed to shut up, put my head down, and just keep working. And so, all of those things had made me feel stuck, that this was the life that was somehow destined for me and I couldn't get out of it. I didn't know of any other viable ways to make a living. I wanted to honor everything that my parents had done, to show them that their sacrifice was worth it. I didn't want to be a brat and feel ungrateful for the position I was in. And I felt like if I had this much privilege, I couldn't complain or do anything different. And for someone whose highest value is freedom, freedom to do what you want, when you want, to create, to express yourself. When that's the case and you feel trapped where that freedom is essentially stripped away from you, you live in this life of constant tension where these two opposing forces are just creating friction internally, and you have no way to resolve it. And so during that time, I was experiencing tons of symptoms where my body was just breaking down. I was extremely depressed, highly anxious, irritable, getting poor sleep, having brain fog all the time, was exhausted, had gut issues, was constantly tense. Like all of my muscles were tight. I mean, I was going to the doctors for a different reason every month. And that's what happens when you live a life of self-betrayal. Because that's what I was living essentially. I had these values that I held dear, and I was living this reality that was completely opposite to it. And I didn't know how to solve that problem. And, when you live a lie, when you live this life where it's not true or authentic to yourself, your body begins to break down. It goes into this state of entropy where your mental and physical health just unravels. And so I was working this job that I didn't find any meaning in other than getting money to make a living. And I was devoting so much of my waking hours to this thing that was just a vehicle to make money. That's it. It didn't have any components of self-fulfillment or enrichment. And it was a life that I really didn't want, but I felt like I had to live. And so I continued that on for the next 10 years of just suppressing this desire to live a different life, suppressing all of the things that were bothering me. And essentially, that's what was causing all of these physical and mental issues. And This is why I was so unhappy, but I didn't know that at the time. It was kind of harder to pinpoint because, again, I would look at my life and think it was objectively good. And there was other aspects that I just couldn't reconcile. You know, people say that your life is a gift. But if my life is a gift, why does it look like a prison? I mean, is this what my life is just going to amount to? Me having to go to this job and spend 8, 9 hours just working for a boss that doesn't even really care about me, a company that doesn't care about me, and who will let me go at a moment's notice? I mean, is this what my one life, my one gift is going to be? And while I did that for a decade, I would have these thoughts about, I have to do this for another 30 years? You know, I wouldn't think about it too much because it would get bleak quick. But there was no light at the end of the tunnel. It was just this dark tunnel that you just rode and would have to ride for another 30 years. And this precious life, right, that we have, this one shot, it's gonna end. I'm gonna die. And I came to that realization on a personal level when I was diagnosed with this rare degenerative heart disease earlier this year. And ironically, I got the news around the week of my birthday. And when I got that news, I didn't really understand what was going on. I was kind of like, are you sure? How accurate are those MRI images? And unfortunately, they're very accurate and conclusive. But also, having been laid off this year, I've had to learn that lesson of, I get one life, I'm going to die. I have no idea when. Shouldn't I choose to live it in a way that I want? What is it that I want? And is it okay to ask for those things in life? The statistic that I came across about the chances of you existing or me existing, and I mean that in the one of one sense, you know, there's only one of you, whoever you are behind the screen. There's one Samantha Jones, one DeQuavius Campbell, one Heejin Lee. The chances of you existing is 1 in 400 trillion. And when I say those numbers, they're not registering. No one's really understanding what that means conceptually. You're just thinking that's a lot of zeros. But if I were to paint the picture, if you were to count from 1 to 1,000,000, it would take 12 days nonstop. So you wake up one day, you decide you want to start counting towards 1,000,000. You don't sleep. You don't eat either. You just maybe have an IV of nourishment that just supplies you with the food that you need for the next almost 2 weeks. And you count and it finishes 12 days later. Now, if you were to count from 1 to 1,000,000,000, that would take 32 years. That's over 90% of my life. So imagine me, I come out the womb and I just start counting. 1, 2, 3. I don't even have time to cry. Conscious baby doesn't want to go to Orlando. He just wants to go Count Dracula and count up these digits. I don't get breastfed. I don't sleep either, and it just ruins my growth. I don't make any friends. I don't go to school. I don't go on any trips. I just focus on counting. And somehow I would keep counting for 32 years, and then I would be done counting from 1 to a billion. That's unsettling. Now, if I were to count from 1 to a trillion, that would take 32,000 years. So, from the time of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ to now, you would just run that back 16 times. So, 16 crucifixions, 16 Roman empires, 16 Titanics, 16 Harambes. You get what I'm saying. Just to count from 1 to a trillion, and we're not even done yet. We have to multiply that by 400. And that would give us 12.8 million years, where out of that 12.8 million years, you would be 1 second in that vast sea of time. You could look at it as life hitting the nastiest parlay in existence. It's the culmination of all of these historical events, wars and famine and deaths and life and two people falling in love coming together and generations of that, all the way down to you. And so I would think about that. I would think about this rare chance that I have to be alive and that I'm going to die. And I couldn't reconcile this fact that I was spending so much of my prime life, my youthful life, on this job. And I don't want to discount or completely bash on these 9 to 5 jobs. I mean, these are ways that people make money. I get that. And it was beneficial for me for a season. But from my perspective, where I had these values for freedom and creativity, and yet feeling confined and trapped, I needed to get out of that circumstance that made me feel like I was wasting my life or living it in a way that I felt like was inherently wrong. And even though I had those desires, my fears would continue to suppress me from trying. The idea that I needed to be grateful for the position I was in would make me further suppress that. And so you just live in this loop. You're just constantly running around in your head of, I don't want to live this life, but I have to live this life. And that ends up creating so much angst within you, and it just exhausts you of all of your energy. And you can't even stop it because you have this innate desire to do something else, but you have all of these reasons of why you can't. And I would see it on my feed. I would see these people living out their dreams. So I would then realize that it was possible, that you didn't have to go to an Ivy League school to be a millionaire or live this nomadic life. That this was available to everyone. You know, with the advent of technology and social media, you're able to make a living and potentially make way more money than you ever would doing something like content creation or just figuring out a digital business versus working this job. But I had no idea how to get there. And so I would live with this understanding and this reality of being in this life that I hated, seeing that a different alternative life existed and that I could somehow work towards it, but I had no idea how to. And so that internal struggle was just raging inside of me and my subconscious, just creating all sorts of issues. And so now I'm sitting here unemployed. It doesn't sound very sexy. You know, I've always dreamed of being a father and a husband. And this doesn't look good for my prospects. But I look at my situation that I think maybe most people would think is very unfortunate. But I also can't help but think that maybe the planets aligned for me. You know, me getting that diagnosis, me being laid off in the same year, and coming to this juncture where I'm having to reconsider this. I have to reconsider what I want to do with my life because I'm responsible for living out whatever dreams I might have. And I get to do it. You know, I'm still breathing, I'm still alive. So if there's anything that you're going to take away from this, I really hope that you realize that you are a gift. Your life is precious. And you only get one. You don't get any do-overs. The world is lucky to have you. And all of your problems, all of your fears, all of the reasons why you're not going after what you want, they're so small. You know, stop giving them the attention and authority over your life, because if you don't even think about it, they don't exist. I mean, we're literally specks on a floating rock in this vast galaxy where I think the estimate to get from one end to the other of the Milky Way is somewhere around 100,000 light years. And you know it's bad when distances have to be measured in time frames. So the instant in which you're watching this, the instant in which you're perceiving your surroundings, you know, light is bouncing off of all of these things and going into your eyeballs. And it's so instantaneous that we don't even perceive that it's happening. We just kind of go with it. But light is traveling. It's going at, I think it's like 186,000 miles per second. So imagine going that speed, not for a second, not for a minute, not for an hour, not for a day, not for a week, not for a month, but a year. Traveling at over 180,000 miles. That's the distance of a light year. And then multiply that by 100,000. And that's just our galaxy. And I'm about to show you this image. And you might be thinking, oh, those are stars, that's space. Cool. Each one of these is a galaxy. So hypothetically, one of these specks could be the Milky Way. And this image, I believe it was captured by the Hubble telescope, that's all we've been able to capture from a man-made tool, telescope. I mean, there's more out there. Like, what? I mean, these statistics and these facts should piss you off. Like, I can't fathom this. Like, I am literally a vapor. I just come and go and I'm gone. That's my life. In this weird life of existence. And I'm worried about some silly thing like, what are people gonna think about me? What if I become homeless? Does this person even like me? Like, none of those things matter. And I'm not in any way some guru now. I haven't reached enlightenment. I still have fears. I mean, I don't know what's going to happen. I could end up working another job. And life is unpredictable. I have no idea where I might end up. But given everything that I've touched on, I think I have to try. Try to live a life that I want to live and give it a good go. I think I deserve that, not because I'm entitled to it, but just given the sheer facts of I shouldn't even be here. And so if I am here, I should definitely give something worth a shot, a good attempt. I mean, how else do I want to live my life? I know right now I don't want to keep doing that. And worst case scenario, right? Let's say I meet someone and we're about to start a family and she's maybe concerned on whether or not I can provide, then, maybe I go back to working 9 to 5. But at least I'll have tried to create a life that I've wanted. And maybe that job is a creative job. It's in a different industry where I don't feel as trapped or I don't feel as empty, and maybe it fulfills me in some way. Who knows, right? So I don't want to bash on people who work 9 to 5 jobs, but this is just what I've learned and this is where I am personally. And I haven't ever felt this free in such a long time. And it's crazy that this is what it took for me to get here. Like, I would be on vacations with my family, taking breaks from work, but it didn't make me feel any more free because I knew ultimately that I had to go back to work. I had to go back to that lifestyle. And, I somehow, even though maybe I should be extremely anxious and worried about my future, I feel I feel good. I mean, yesterday I caught myself smiling. I was changing and I caught myself smiling in the mirror. And I started laughing because I'm like, why am I smiling? I don't know the last time I was just smiling. I've been able to slow down and just kind of appreciate the little things in life, and I've been present. Like even washing the dishes, I'm grateful to be present in that moment. I haven't felt that in so long. I don't know the last time I was present. Nature is healing, I guess. And these are all signs that are showing me that this is what I needed. I needed to just have some separation from the grind. And I know it's going to be hard. I know, trying to do anything and create anything is difficult. That process is daunting and uncertain and, yeah, just tough. But I feel like I have to try. So If you're struggling out there with the same issues that I've just talked about, hang in there and try to really think about what you want out of life. Write it out, start journaling, and try to create a plan to work towards that, creating actionable steps that help you get towards those goals. Don't do what I did of just sitting in limbo and going into this dark spiral and feeling like you can't do anything about it. You can. You have a choice. You have agency. You have autonomy. Don't be so afraid, and don't let anything keep you from trying to live the life you want. So if you're struggling with life, because life is hard, I want to assure you that you're not alone. I'm right there with you. And if you feel like none of this is worth it, and you're not even sure why you're doing any of this, it gets better. I don't know when or how, but it does get better.